Hello once again. It's Brian from Tickets Place Reviews as I take a look at possible titles for 1994 Milestone movies from Netflix. Netflix is using this year to celebrate the milestone anniversaries of older titles, some of which deserved it, like Chinatown, The Conversation, Top Secret, and Amadeus, and some not so much. The front page and The Joy of Sex comes to mind. What are we getting for 1994 in July? Well, I'm pleased to announce it's going to be a haul of good titles, a mixture of drama, comedy, and action, along with a few clunkers. I got them ranked into tiers from most likely to doubtful. And a quick note, I went ahead and crossed out all the Disney and Warner Brother titles, so unfortunately we're not getting The Lion King or The Specialist. Definitely sad for the former, but Disney Plus exclusive. As for the latter, I'm sure that it will be somewhere like Max or Hulu. Disney Plus would get a heart attack if the viewers saw that one there. So what does make the cut? What does make the cut? The answer could surprise you. Let's start with the films I almost think could be sure things. And in case you're wondering, a quick note here. I listed the Netflix milestone movies by the numbers. We got 20 here and 22 there for 84. And in 94, I think the number could be 24, but it could be more because a lot more films were made in 94 as opposed to the previous years. Anyway, let's take a look at the almost sure things. This usually brings forth a film that won Best Picture, so congrats are in order for Forrest Gump. Although probably not the best film in 1994, it did have a nice mix of retro charm and modern technology led by Tom Hanks' Best Actor turn. Just don't try to think about what happened to Jenny. Now, a film a lot to think is the Best Picture 1994's next on the docket is The Shawshank Redemption, feels likely to make the cut. The story of an unjustly imprisoned man in his quest for making the most of his life starred Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman and was directed by Frank Darabont. It was a basic cable staple for a while, and I think it will come to Netflix in July. To nobody's surprise, Pulp Fiction also feels like a no-brainer entry. Multiple Oscar nominations for a film that led to countless imitators, and the emergence of both Quentin Tarantino and Samuel L. Jackson as forces to reckon with, as well as the revival of John Travolta from B-movie actor to A-list. The story of two hitmen, a washed-up boxer with a watch, and a group of others who cross their paths mixes up time and has many memorable quotes and sequences that resonate decades later. Considering we got the sequel as a recent entry this past month, it feels quite likely that the original film shows up as well. So Dumb and Dumber, starring Jim Carrey and Jeff Daniels, is a silly comedy about two ne'er-do-wells who end up searching for a woman who left a bunch of money behind at an airport. They have some dumb but hilarious things that happen along the way. Speaking of films that proved to be a revelation, let me introduce you to cult favorite Clerks. The black and white film about the goings-on in a convenience store marked the debut of Kevin Smith. The unique comedy should be a lock to show up on July 1st. For those looking for low action and star power, we got the need for speed. Making stars out of its leads Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, the film about a bus that has to go a certain speed or have it go boom also features Dennis Hopper as the bad guy. Pop quiz hotshot: what do you do when Speed ends up showing up on Netflix? Also making the cut is Leon the Professional, the story which features a young girl asking a hitman to teach her his ways as he protects her from a corrupt DEA agent and his minions, made stars of John Reno, Natalie Portman, and Gary Oldman. Everyone should be on the lookout for this one as well. And finally, the last one on the more or less locks list isn't a good film by any means, but considering Netflix wants to send Axel F to the moon, baby, I wouldn't be surprised if Beverly Hills Cop 3 will probably show up on July 1st. Mind you, the films aren't overly reliant on continuity, but just in case, I think the first two films also show up on that date as well. Like the others, it has Eddie Murphy laughing and doing his thing as he solves a crime involving an amusement park. Now we go from the ones I think are almost sure things to the ones that are likely to make the cut. Films I think that have a better and even chance of being included in the Milestone film series for 1994. Arnold Schwarzenegger has two films that came out in 94. Although both of these can make the cut, I think they will go with True Lies. It's an action comedy about a spy who has the cover of an ordinary salesman, but when his marriage gets into jeopardy because his wife is considering having an affair with a self-described spy, he finds himself having to save the day while also trying to save his marriage. Co-starring Jamie Lee Curtis is a wife who proves to be a quick learner of both a tango and the transformation from mousy to hot. True Lies will provide your action and comedy needs. Speaking of action, Jean-Claude Van Damme has his own two films that came out in 94, and I think one of these is coming out in July. You could argue a Time Cop, a science fiction action film, will end up here. I think the play will be for Street Fighter instead. It wasn't easy to make a movie out of a video game in 1994, as you'll learn when watching. But I could see Netflix's Twitter account having fun with the Tuesday and Game Over memes from Raul Julia, who plays the chief villain in Bison. Also with Kylie Minogue and Ming-Na Wen, watch Street Fighter without spending some quarters in July. But what if you want romance? Well, I think Four Weddings and a Funeral will likely make the cut as well on July 1st. The film is a romantic dramedy about Hugh Grant and Andy McNeil who meet and perhaps find love over, well, take a wild guess. Along with Emma Thompson and Rowan Atkinson, it'll tickle your funny bone and possibly also touch your heart as well. Now, Fresh didn't do much at the box office, but over the years it became a critical hit, and a calling card for co-star Giancarlo Esposito is yet as another showcase for Samuel L. Jackson and the writer-director Boz Yakin. Fresh is about a kid who tries to free himself and his sister from a hopeless situation. Considering chess is a family game, maybe he succeeds. I mentioned that we'll likely find out together in July. It could happen to you isn't a film that was a blockbuster, nor was it a critical masterpiece, but it did do well enough at the box office and with critics, so there is that. Bridget Fonda, Nicolas Cage, and Rosie Perez star in this based on a true story film about a cop who decides to tip a waitress half of his lottery ticket and repercussions that happen when he strikes it rich. Of course, it's currently out on Netflix, but I think they usually have at least one title that's out on Netflix that ends up being chosen for it, and I could see it being this one. Now let's round out the field with other films I think we will I predict we'll get on July 1st. A mix of Oscar nominees, cult classics, and even a flat-out bad movie or two. The joy of sex effect, if you will. Let's start with the Best Actress winner of that year, Blue Sky, which starred Jessica Lange as a wife of an Army nuclear engineer who gets involved in a cover-up and an affair following a move to Alabama. Starring Tommy Lee Jones and Powers Booth, you should be able to judge for yourself in July. Another Oscar winner for 1994 was Legends of the Fall. This Edward Zwick Western won for Best Cinematography. An epic film about a saga of the family, stars Anthony Hopkins, Brad Pitt, Aidan Quinn, and Henry Thomas. Check out this blockbuster film that I think will come out in July. Another Oscar contender was The Madness of King George, starring Oscar nominees Nigel Hawthorne and Helen Moran. The luck of King George III as his mental state and relationship with his oldest son both deteriorates, leading to a crisis in the British monarchy. It did get some decent box office returns, and ultimately it won Best Art Direction at the Academy Awards that year. One film that should have been nominated for an Oscar was Hoop Dreams. This documentary that explores the fate of two talented Chicago basketball players named William Gates and Arthur Agee was originally supposed to be a 30-minute special on PBS before ultimately becoming a critical darling as a nearly 3-hour documentary directed by Steve James. If it shows up on Netflix, I will have to give this one a go. And then we got a blockbuster for the road. That would be Stargate. It didn't get nominated for an Oscar, but it was a blockbuster smash. Starring Kurt Russell, James Spader, and James Davidson, the story of a Stargate opening a path between Earth and a distant alien world will be sure to intrigue viewers, I predict, in July. And then now, next up, are going to be several cult entries, sort of like Repo Man for 1984. Films that weren't big hits, but drew some enthusiasm from viewers. Let's start with Serial Mom, which will introduce us to John Waters. Before becoming a hip answer to Roger Ebert, he was a director that pushed the envelope with titles like Pink Flamingos and Polyester. In Serial Mom, Kathleen Turner plays a woman obsessed with having a perfect family and is willing to kill to make it so. While more mainstream in his output in the 1970s and early 80s, there is still an edge. Co-starring Sam Waterston, Ricky Lake, and Matthew Lillard, I wouldn't be surprised if we end up getting this one. Another one which I think will end up showing up will be The Last Seduction, another cult film that ended up putting Linda Fiorentino on the map. A neo-noir about a telemarketing manager who gets mixed up with cash, another man, and murder after having a fight with her husband. John Dahl directed this film, which became ineligible for an Oscar due to it having been broadcast on HBO first. But Peter Berg and Bill Pullman starring this critically acclaimed sleeper hit that should feel nothing to be ashamed about, considering how good it was. And then finally we go with Fear of a Black Cat, which is a mockumentary that takes aim at the rap industry of the late 80s and early 90s. Starring Rusty Cundieff, who also directed and wrote the film, Larry Scott, and Mark Christopher Lawrence, as members of a rap group that a sociologist played by Cassie Lemons decides to make a documentary for her graduate thesis. Over the course of a year, she learns plenty about the groups and their beliefs. Bring your laughs for this spoof film. And last but not least, the more I think about, the more likely The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, makes the cut. It's an LGBTQ film in a year that didn't have a lot of them, and stars Hugo Weaving, an actor we now know more for the Matrix films, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and V for Vendetta. Terrence Stamp and Guy Pearce also star in this road trip film with two drag queens and a transgender woman as they ride on a bus named Priscilla. Now finally we got two bad films. So what's 1994's answer to The Joy of Sex? It's time to pay attention. Starting with Clifford, a story about a 10-year-old boy who wreaks havoc on the life of his uncle, a successful architect who has designs on wooing a coworker by showing how well he gets along with kids. Starring Martin Short as a 10-year-old, yes, you heard that right, Charles Grodin as the uncle, and Mary Steenburgen. The film has a tomato meter of 14%, but somehow it became a cult classic decades later. Who's right? I predict you'll have a chance to decide this one. And finally, Even Cowgirls Get the Blues is a Gus Van Sant movie starring Uma Thurman as a hitchhiker with unusually long thumbs who ends up in a conflict involving a beauty ranch, government agencies, and some cranes. Receiving a tomato meter of 17%, the film was a box office bust. But I will admit that the casting on this one is eclectic, with Keanu Reeves, Pat Morita, John Hurt, and Roseanne all involved in this one. If it ends up dropping in July, you'll have a chance to decide for yourself. Now let's look at some alternatives, films that might sink in if there are more than 24 entries or can substitute for one of the films I talked about already. Starting with Time Cop. Now I said I felt like they were going to pick Street Fighter, but what if I was overthinking it and they went with this one instead? The Peter Hyams science fiction time-traveling film about an agency who fights crimes, committed while moving back and forth as they explore a corrupt politician who finds himself tempted at the new technology, does star Van Damme as well as Mia Sara and Ron Silver. Although it was a box office hit, critics were a little bit more mixed on it. Speaking of double dipping, what if Arnold gets both films in? Junior is a story of a research scientist who agrees to carry a baby for 3 months to test a drug they were working on for expectant women. Directed by Ivan Reitman, who did Ghostbusters and Twins among other titles, it reteams Arnold with his twin co-star Danny DeVito in a film that was a box office bust despite its high concept. Critics were torn this one as well, but with Emma Stone and Frank Langella co-starring, it appears to be another film that maybe you'll get the chance to see for yourself. Considering Alec Baldwin's name has been in news of late, perhaps Netflix might put one or both of his titles in the Milestone collection. Based on the radio series, The Shadow takes a different spin on the superhero genre as a rich reformed criminal takes on a nemesis who is a deadly descendant of Genghis Khan, who has plans of building a nuclear bomb in 1930s New York City. Starring Baldwin, Penelope Ann Miller, and John Lone, the film was a box office disappointment and a mixed bag critically. The other title is a remake of the 1972 Steve McQueen and Ally McGraw action thriller known as The Getaway. In the Ronald Donaldson version, Alec Baldwin and Kim Basinger play married criminals who get away with over $1 million in a dog track heist while dealing with a double-crossing colleague played by Michael Madsen. Critics weren't kind to film and the box office didn't care, but based on Madsen's glowing appraisal, maybe they were wrong. Mi Vida Loca focuses on young female gang members in LA who deal with friendships, relationships, motherhood, as well as gang responsibilities. The mostly unknown cast didn't really set the box office world on fire, but critics were fond of this one. There were a few names that would pop up again and again over the years. Selma Hayek, Danny Trejo, and Jason Lee. But like I said, mostly unknown cast, but hey. If critics like it, maybe there's a chance you might as well. And then finally, we got Blown Away, a tense action thriller about a member of a Boston bomb squad who is pursuing a recently released Irish bomber, targeting members of his team. Starring Jeff Bridges and Tommy Lee Jones, it didn't set the box office world on fire, and critics focused on the horrid Irish accents rather than the rest of the film. The last list consists of a few titles that were long shots, but I think they're kind of worth bringing up anyway. Like a lot of people, I totally get that Kevin Spacey is canceled for his crimes against other actors. But he's not the center of the ref. Dennis Leary is. And his character, a thief who ends up having to play a marriage counselor for a wealthy family he's trying to rob, is full of sarcasm and bad cheer. For those that like the Christmas films without much sentiment, The Ref could be a present in July. Eat, Drink, Man, Woman is a bit more likely to make the cut, but still a long shot due to a lack of recognizable names. This Ang Lee film is about a semi-retired chef and his 3 daughters who face various challenges in life with a bomb. It did receive critical acclaim and turned a decent profit. Threesome is a 1994 comedy about a trio of roommates who connect despite a clerical error, but their attempt at a threesome threatens to unravel all the good vibes. Despite having a gay man among the trio, which was kind of rare for 1994, the film received critical brickbats and lost money for TriStar. But perhaps this movie might get better reception from viewers now. And let's finish things up with a satire of the film industry that almost became a movie musical. I'd Do Anything concerns himself with a struggling actor who tries to reconnect with his 6-year-old daughter, who he hadn't seen in 2 years. Things take a turn after a failed audition of his when she gets cast in a sitcom. Although the critical reception for this James L. Brooks film was positive, audiences chose to skip it in theaters. And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy this look at titles that may be heading our way as part of the 1994 Milestone Movie Collection from Netflix. Be sure to subscribe and spread the word. This is Tickets Please Reviews, and the booth is now closed.